Disclaimer. This content is a work of fiction. All characters are fictional. The story is not based on real events or actual legal proceedings. Before the Gavel Fell. Episode 5, The State versus the Observer. The first time Chris Katagis saw the title, he thought it was a formatting error. State of Connecticut. V. Christopher Katagis. The words were centered, balanced, official in appearance, too official. Chris stared at the screen, waiting for the rest of the entry to load. Charges, statutes, anything that explained why the name of a state was now positioned against his own. Nothing followed. No count, no allegation, no summary, just the title. He refreshed the page. The title remained. Below it, a single line appeared. Status, pending jurisdictional review. Chris leaned back in his chair. This was new. Until now, the system had avoided framing him as an opponent, a subject, an observer, a placeholder. But this was different. This was adversarial. He opened the case details slowly, like opening something he already knew would not make sense. Court, Superior Court, venue, Connecticut. Proceeding. Type, declaratory. Declaratory of what? It did not say. Chris noticed something else immediately. There was no prosecutor listed, no attorney name, no department, no office. The state was the party. And that unsettled him more than any charge could have. The notice arrived an hour later. Not served, not delivered. It simply appeared in his inbox. You are not required to appear. Chris read the sentence 3 times, then the next line. Your presence has already been recorded. That night he walked, not to clear his head, not to think, to feel anchored to something physical. Connecticut at night was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Old buildings, dim streetlights, roads that remembered where they had been before they were paved. He passed the courthouse without stopping. He didn't need to go inside to know the case was there. The next morning, the docket updated again. Motion filed. Filed by State. Chris opened it. Motion for recognition. Not dismissal, not prosecution. Recognition. The motion argued in carefully neutral language that the court should formally acknowledge the existence of a participant whose role had expanded beyond procedural involvement. The language was dense, bureaucratic, almost elegant. Chris read one line twice. The subject's continued interaction with the record has produced effects that require formal acknowledgement. Effects. That word sat with him. He had not done anything. He had not filed motions. He had not argued law. He had not acted. He had noticed. And noticing, it seemed, was enough. At 2:14 p.m., a notice was added. Hearing scheduled. This time, there was a room number. Courtroom 6. Chris did not receive an instruction to attend. But he went anyway. Courtroom 6 was larger than Courtroom 4, newer, cleaner, designed to look transparent. The seal on the wall was unmistakable. State of Connecticut. And fictional or not, the weight of it pressed down on the room. The judge entered alone. No clerk announcement, no bailiff call, just presence. Mr. Katagis, the judge said, looking directly at him, you may remain seated. Chris stayed where he was. There is no allegation against you, the judge continued. That is important. Chris nodded. This proceeding, the judge said, exists to determine whether the system may continue to operate as it has. And me? Chris asked. You, the judge said, are evidence. The word echoed. Evidence of what? Chris asked. The judge folded his hands. Evidence that a process can produce outcomes without resistance, he said, until it encounters awareness. Chris felt the familiar tightening. So, the state is responding to me? He asked. The judge did not answer immediately. The state, he said finally, is responding to instability. A man stood from the side of the room. Chris hadn't noticed him before. He did not introduce himself. The question before the court, the man said, is whether continued observation creates unacceptable risk. Risk? Chris let out a slow breath. And if it does, he asked. Then the process must be adjusted, the man replied. And if it doesn't, Chris asked, then the observer becomes part of the record permanently. Chris looked at the seal again. State of Connecticut versus Chris Katagis. It wasn't about guilt. It was about control. The judge looked at Chris. You have not violated any law, he said, but you have exceeded your role. Chris almost smiled. I didn't choose the role, he said. No, the judge replied, but you accepted it. Silence filled the room. Then the judge spoke again. This court recognizes the subject, he said. Not as a defendant, not as a plaintiff. Chris waited. But as a constraint. The word landed heavily. A constraint on what? Chris asked. On silence, the judge said. The gavel did not fall. The hearing ended without a ruling. When Chris checked the docket outside, the title had changed. State of Connecticut v. Chris Katagis. Status continued. No decision entered, no conclusion reached, just continuation. Chris stood on the courthouse steps for a long time after that, watching people pass who had no idea what had almost been decided. The system had not accused him. It had acknowledged him. And in doing so, it had admitted something important. Silence was no longer automatic. It required enforcement. If you enjoyed this story, consider supporting the channel by liking the video, sharing it with someone who enjoys fictional court stories, and subscribing for future episodes. Thank you for listening.